It's 11 minutes to 6. This is Wake Up to Money with Nicky Clark and Andy Verity. Prisoners leaving jail are at risk of falling back into crime because of financial exclusion. That's according to a report out today by the Prison Reform Trust and the National Association of Reformed Offenders, which is now known as Unlock. The report claims that many prisoners leaving jail have problems accessing basic financial services such as bank accounts and insurance. And it says the majority of ex-offenders' debts increase during their time in prison. They're also 10 times more likely than the rest of the population to use loan sharks. Let's find out more about this from Chris Barth, who's Director of Projects at Unlock and one of the authors of today's report. Good morning.
Good morning.
Just paint a picture for us of what financial life is like for a prisoner emerging from prison.
Well, I mean, it starts right at the beginning, actually, in terms of not being able to get access to maybe credit from a bank and having to turn to loan sharks. And we found in this report that 4 out of 5 people who'd used a loan shark had been threatened for those debts.
Most prisoners, when they come out of prison, do they have any money at all?
When you leave prison, you're given a £46 discharge grant.
46 quid?
That's supposed to fill the time between walking out of the door and your first, either your benefit payment or hopefully, some payment for employment. Now, in reality, that's supposed to go 2 weeks. In reality, it's more like 2 months. So essentially, we're letting people out of prison with around £46 and hoping that they behave themselves for a couple of months on that money.
46 quid to last 2 months.
Mm-hmm.
Not much chance of putting a deposit down on somewhere to rent, for example.
No, what tends to happen is, given that there's not a lot of hope around £46, is drug dealers will stand at the end of the road outside of the prison and just collect the £46 as they come back out again. So it's no great surprise that reoffending is highest in that first period as people walk out of the door.
And what about other things, like, for example, if you are, say you could borrow some money from a friend or a family relative, or you can stay with a member of the family for a little while, are you going to be able to get yourself back on your feet? Are you going to get access to a bank account, for example, so you can receive your wages?
Well, a bank account's one of the sort of most fundamental things in this society. If you're going to be working, you're going to need somewhere to put that money, and employers require that. But unfortunately, a lack of passport, a lack of driving licence, a lack of 3 months utility bills at HMP Parkhurst means it's extremely difficult actually to open a bank account, and therefore difficult to find work.
So the banker says no. Will employers tend to refuse to employ you? I mean, can an ex-offender disguise their record and get a job without that affecting their chances?
No, that's very, very difficult indeed. One of the biggest things that holds people back is discrimination, and the Rehabilitation Offenders Act 1974 basically means that the vast majority of people will have to disclose everything on their record. So the first hurdle is you're an ex-offender, you're a reformed offender, hopefully. Employers don't like that very much, particularly in this economy. There's lots of people to choose from instead of you. And the second thing is, if you can get the job, then it could be the bank account that will be the real barrier.
Shouldn't the prison authorities be linking up with social services to get all this sorted out before they ever leave prison?
It depends what you mean by social services. I mean, those are lacking to a large extent. This kind of work should start from day one. So someone comes into prison, have you got problems with money? Have you got a bank account? Have you got this kind of support? Unfortunately, prisons are based between punishment and rehabilitation. The balance is about 99% to 1% at the moment.
Now, obviously, prisoners aren't the sort of people who immediately attract people's sympathy, so I guess it's hard to argue this case. But, for example, with debts, if a prisoner has got themselves into debt and then they go to jail, they work out their sentence, they've done their time, what's likely to have happened to their debts in the meantime?
Well, as you can imagine, if anybody here listening now went to prison today, they'd lose their income. Around a third of people lose a job when they go into prison. And if you imagine what would happen to your debts if you just didn't contact any of your creditors for the next 5 years, that obviously can become absolutely mountainous.
Aren't they allowed to make phone calls and say, look, I'm in jail, I can't pay, can you please give me a payment holiday, or let the interest rack up?
You're asking some very obvious questions, and I wish that they had an obvious answer, but telephone calls are extremely tightly controlled. Even letter writing can be difficult. A lot of people who are the sort of people who end up in prison don't understand how financial systems work, and to a certain extent they need some information to be able to do those things. But the numbers that you can call from a prison are extremely tightly controlled.
So if you could have one reform which would help ex-offenders emerging get back on their feet, what would it be?
One is very hard to choose from. At the moment, I would say that the passion is really about the fact that everybody leaving prison should be able to have at least a basic bank account, not with any credit facilities, just so they can get back to working. Because I think no matter what your political view on these things is, if we can get people into work, if we can get them stable accommodation, then they're not going to go back to crime.
Thank you very much. Chris Barth there, Director of Projects at Unlock.